Welcome to my 40 subscriber face reveal special, where I try changing up my tactics in hopes of actually trying to get monetized on YouTube. I'm going to try to do everything about that besides actually posting more. Today I'm going to be talking about something you probably heard a lot about, like every day for the past couple of years. The trade conflict between the two largest economies in the world, the US and China. Despite how incredibly important this trade conflict is in deciding the outcome of the 21st century, political commentators, aka the scum of the earth, have given their own hot takes like, I know what's gonna happen, and it'll end soon. I'm gonna give you a brave prediction. I don't know what's gonna happen, but I know it won't end soon, which is why I delayed in making this video, other than the fact that I'm lazy and get caught down in the Facebook video rabbit hole for 35 minutes at a time. Hopefully my bet won't age poorly. Now I know there won't be a trade deal before 2020, because it's neither in the US's or China's interest to have one before the US presidential election. Why is this? Because it's built into both their strategies. But before we understand their strategies, we have to understand what each nation is trying to achieve. The US's goals, although not really defined, like most of its foreign policy throughout the past 3 decades, is mainly to try to make China play by the rules of international trade, otherwise known as the rules we wrote, so nobody can beat us. China's major goals are they kind of like doing those things and don't want to stop. A little bit of a bad boy in this situation. I like to play by the rules. And the ways they don't like playing by those rules have 3 main components: monetary, firms in technology, and capital markets. Both nation strategies are built off their respective strengths, America's economy versus China's political cycle. Both China's and America's strategies seem to be to try to achieve moderate structural, political, or economic change within their opponent by seeing who will duck first. Both try to work to their own advantages. America's economy is less dependent on China's than vice versa. China's economy is very export heavy, it's very rural, although exponentially less so. Its banking system isn't stable, and with corruption, a lack of property rights, and empty GDP figures, it's not necessarily a developed economy. America's economy is quite the opposite, and is trying to outlast China's in terms of pain tolerance. The US economy ranks high on economic freedom, banking stability. Yeah, I don't know why either. A highly skilled labor force, seemingly endless amounts of capital, and also its biggest strength. It's built on this, a crusty $1 bill that was thrown at me at a bar, otherwise known as the US dollar, the most powerful currency in the world, making up 40% of the world reserve currencies. The next highest reserve currency is the euro, which only makes up about half its rate at 20%. And the renminbi, China's currency, is only a little over 2% on a good day. Being a powerful world reserve currency has its advantages. In trade, firms want to use more of you to buy goods and services. So firms, states, and other institutions that use your currency are subjugated to your economy and the whims of your central bank. However, China has a weapon of its own when it comes to monetary policy. China holds what has been called a nuclear option that will destroy the economy of both countries. Over the past 2 decades, it's not really been a secret that China has been steadily acquiring US debt in the form of treasury bonds. The US government is the largest holder of debt in the world, and if China decides to sell off all its reserves of treasury bonds, it might cause people and institutions not to trust in the US dollar, which will lead to deflation and might make the most used currency ever equal to 100 trillion billion Zimbabwe dollar. However, there are some caveats to this mutually assured destruction. Although it has the highest debt in the world right now, the US government does not come close when it has the highest debt to GDP ratio, a ratio which is a good measurement of whether or not a government will be able to pay off its debt. At the time of making this video, the US debt to GDP ratio is about 110%, which is, by all accounts, high, but not the highest. Rating agencies like Moody's, which basically give governments their own credit scores, have placed the US government at the highest tiers of accountability. China has sold off $180 billion in US Treasury bonds, a whopping 1/6 of their dollar-backed securities at the time, in August of 2015. But this huge sell-off didn't have any kind of substantial effect on the market. If China overestimates the value of its reserves, it will destroy any kind of bargaining power it has over the US. More importantly, it would castrate any kind of future power that China would have to devalue the renminbi, something it needs to do in order to maintain a favorable trade balance and to keep exporters exporting, which, as I said before, is a vital part of mainland China's economy. China's main advantage is that its political cycle outlasts the US's. Compared to the 4-year term the President of the United States has, the President of China has a 5-year term. And also, as of 2018, President Xi ended term limits. Oh yeah, and mainland China is effectively controlled by a one-party state. The CCP, our Chinese Communist Party, even though it isn't without its factionalism, has the ability to commit to a long-term strategy. It has also been often mentioned that President Xi Jinping's cult of personality and grip on power in modern China has only been rivaled by Mao Zedong. This continuity within the administration is incredibly powerful, as it puts the United States at a distinct disadvantage, since they have to change the executive branch, the presidency, about every 8 years. 8 years isn't enough to have a long-term strategy to pay off a student loan, let alone a strategy to geopolitics. I'm gonna put that on a shirt someday. It's gonna be part of my student loan strategy. The CCP is hoping for a Democratic win in 2020. In particular, Joe Biden, whose son, Hunter Biden, got a nice $1.5 billion equity deal with the Bank of China, even though he didn't have any kind of private equity experience beforehand. During the writing and research process of this video, I didn't necessarily foresee how big of a political hot topic this was going to become. I thought it was going to be, our little secret. Us and a couple million other people. Not trying to be political or anything, just describing the strategies that each country has. As of October 2019, Sleepy Joe seems like a bad bet, and he might not win.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
This is a huge problem for the CCP, because the other Democratic frontrunners, Warren and Bernie, don't look at China as fondly as Biden. In fact, their rhetoric towards China is just as harsh as Trump's. Biden's continual senior moments have shown that even if America's economy falters enough for a regime change, it might not be completely to the CCP's benefit. Something that is to the Chinese Communist Party's benefit is their grip over mainland China's economy. China employs the strategy of direct investment. It is a policy that champions certain companies, like Huawei, which are in strategic industries like communications, oil, or high tech. This type of strategy is mainly utilized by states that have a centrally planned economy, although the US and the EU also use this strategy for some strategic industries and tech. For instance, the US government directly finances Boeing, which is why it was a terrible idea for people to sell their stocks because of the 737s a couple months ago. They're always going to have another government contract coming in. Always, always, always. Don't take my financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Also, I'm poor. America's geoeconomic strategy, if you can say it has a strategy, is based more on protection of already existing firms. This is a traditionally liberal strategy, despite what your uncle who has a bunker somewhere in Oklahoma has to say about it. Basically, the US allows firms to compete in the open market, and then writes regulations to protect the best, most efficient, and powerful of those firms. This way, the US government doesn't have to micromanage and finance corporations, but instead protects them against predators and cuts them down and slaps them on the wrist when they're acting up, like your little brother when he's starting to eat more than you. However, light slaps on the wrist isn't something the Chinese Communist Party prefers to partake in particular with civil strife, like what is happening right now in Hong Kong. In the past and currently, the CCP hasn't been too lenient when it comes to accommodating different political ideology. The Cultural Revolution, the Tiananmen Square massacre, and Uyghur re-education camps are examples of how the CCP deals with differing notions of culture, civil society, and religion. This leads to the major problem that the CCP has in one of their capital markets. The riots in Hong Kong have disrupted the only place where the party can actually buy dollars as a way of controlling the value of the renminbi to keep Chinese goods competitive. Export is like a weak currency, as it lowers the cost of their goods to consumers, since consumers use other currencies like the US dollar, have more buying power since the exchange rate is lowered, while the exporter doesn't have to spend more money in making or buying those goods. Mainland China is also not really open for business, and Hong Kong is the only capital market where Chinese companies can go to acquire necessary amounts of foreign investment. Foreign investors usually have limited access to the Shanghai and Shenzhen markets, and would also be skeptical of the returns they might get due to the arbitrary enforcement of law and lack of property rights on the mainland. Despite its growing competitors in Beijing, Shanghai, or Shenzhen, Hong Kong still remains the most important city for commerce in China. The riots that have engulfed the city have really put a big question mark on investments in China from foreigners as Hong Kong's long-standing tradition of British common law begins to deteriorate. Therefore, it would be a bad decision to invade Hong Kong and suppress the rioters with force, as foreigners would flee the only capital market that adheres to a strict rule of law. Capital flight is definitely a way to lose a trade war, but the hand that wrote the letters of declining economy can also spell out doom for the party itself. The Chinese Communist Party, like all ruling political institutions, needs to justify itself, and the only way it has done this during the past 30 years has been with continued growth, prosperity, and structure, something that most likely cannot happen with absolute foreign capital flight. A temperamental use of force could cause the CCP to lose their mandate. In fact, the two major things that Chinese diplomats don't talk about are the Cultural Revolution and Tiananmen Square, which suggests the party's grip on power on the mainland, although absolute, is built on fractures that they believe can be exploited. So that would be fun. The crumpling of the world's largest country and 2 to 4 largest economies. So if your life's in a rut and you're waiting for Jesus to come and get you out, just know that 2 powerful states are playing a dangerous game of chicken, but this time they're going to starve you before they send in the nukes. If you liked this video, or if you didn't, don't forget to like and subscribe. All proceeds go to me being a bum.